Hi there, Perfecto de Castro here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you're having a great day. So this is a continuation of part 4 of music theory for guitarists. In part 4, we've started getting into chord building, and for that video we finished building the different classifications of triads. So in this video we will talk about 7th chords, chord extensions, and add and suspended chords. If you haven't seen parts 1, 1.5, 2, 3, and 4 yet, then I suggest you watch those videos first so that you are up to speed. And as in those videos, I am going at it old school with my pen and my little notebook right here, so feel free to follow along. Now let's outline a major scale. Let's pick a key. I used D major in the last video, so let's get a flat key for this one. Let's try it in F major. So F major only has one flat, so we're going to write it down. We have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. Now let's write down the interval names of each scale degree. So you have your 1 or your root, then this is the major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, this is the major 6th, major 7th, and you have your perfect octave. And as a refresher, we have our major triad, minor triad, we have our diminished triad, and we have our augmented triad, and their respective spellings. 1 major 3rd, perfect 5th, 1 flat 3rd or minor 3rd, perfect 5th. Diminished has the 1, the flat 3rd, and flat 5th, or minor 3rd and diminished 5th, and finally augmented has the 1, the major 3rd, and the augmented 5th or the sharp 5th. And again, as a refresher, to get the triad notes, we stack thirds on top of each other. So we have the root, 3rd from the root is the 3rd, 3rd from the 3rd is the 5th. Now to get our 7th chords, we will get the 3rd above the 5th and stack that on top. Okay, so now we will have the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7. So it's a 4-note chord. Now here are the different 7th chord qualities. So we have the major 7th, which is 1, 3, 5, and 7, all majors. We have the minor 7th, which is a minor triad, flat 3, 5, with a minor 7th, so a flat 7th. Now here's where it gets a little tricky, because the major, minor, diminished, and augmented designations can either be applied to the main triad or any of the added chords above the triad. An example of which is the next chord. So we have a minor chord with a major 7th. That is a minor chord, minor triad, with a regular 7. The shorthand for this can be written as M with a parenthesis, capital M7. So the capital M designates a major, the small caps M designates minor. Now we can also have a major triad with a minor 7th in it. Okay, so we have your 1, 3, and 5 with a flat 7. However, instead of calling it major with a minor 7th, major minor 7th, it's simpler to think of it as a dominant 7th. And the shorthand for that is just a 7. It's called a dominant 7th because when you harmonize the major scale in 7th chords, you get this spelling when you get to the dominant, which is the 5th chord. I will expound on that idea in a later video, but in the meantime, click on the card above to go check it out in an old video that I did about harmonized triads. Now from here, let's tackle the diminished and augmented chords. Like the minor chord, a diminished 7th chord has 2 versions. Okay, so we have the half diminished 7 and the full diminished 7. So half diminished 7 is a diminished triad with a flat 7. It's half diminished because only the triad is diminished and the 7th is not. The 7th is just a minor. So to get the fully diminished 7th, we have the diminished triad and a diminished 7th, which is a double flat 7th. Now, as for the designations, the common shorthand for the half diminished 7 is a minor 7 flat 5. And the fully diminished 7 gets the diminished 7 shorthand. Now, augmented 7s are a little tricky because augmented refers to the quality of the triad, not necessarily the 7th chord. So we're going to forego the augmented 7th because when you augment the 7th or you sharp the 7, you get the root. And it doesn't really give you a new sounding chord. So let's focus on two kinds of augmented 7th chords. An augmented triad plus a major 7th and an augmented triad plus a minor 7th. So augmented major 7th would be the augmented triad 1, 3, sharp 5, and your major 7th. And the augmented with a minor 7th, which is a 1, a 3, a sharp 5, and a flat 7. Now, the shorthand designations for these will be as follows. So, the augmented with a major 7th will be a major 7, sharp 5. And the augmented with a minor 7th will be a dominant 7, sharp 5. Now let's work these chords out in the key of F major. So let's start with the first one. F major 7th chord would be your F, your A, your C, and the 7th would be an E. Okay, so F, A, C, E. F minor 7 would be an F, an A flat, a C, and an E flat. F minor with a major 7th would be F, A flat, C with an E. F dominant 7th would be an F, an A C, and an E flat. F minor 7 flat 5 would be an F, an A flat, a C flat, and an E flat. An F diminished 7 or F fully diminished 7 would be an F, A flat, C flat, E double flat. Now F major 7 sharp 5 will be an F, A C sharp, and an E. And finally F7 sharp 5 is F, A, C sharp, and an E flat. Now if you find yourself getting confused by E double flat or C flat, saying, oh, there's no such thing as E double flat or there's no such thing as C flat, please review part 3 of this music theory for guitar series entitled Intervals and Harmonics. That will explain why we have these designations. Okay, now from 7th chords, we now move into chord extensions. So far in one octave, we have been able to stack 4 thirds on top of each other. Now to pile on chord extensions, we need to keep stacking thirds on top of each other. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to take our major scale and extend it into the 2nd octave. So we have F here, G, A, B flat again, C, D, E, and then F. And now we are also going to extend our interval names for the scale degrees. So we stopped at 8. 2nd octave G will be your 9th. 2nd octave A will be your 10th. 2nd octave B flat will be 11th, and then 12th, and then 13th, 14th, and 15th. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of our redundancies. So since we've already used our 1, 3, 5, and 7, we have no need for them in the 2nd octave, right? So we don't usually use 8, right? We don't use F major 8. We don't use F major 10. We don't use F major 12. we don't use F major 14, and we don't use F major 15. Okay, we don't use that. That leaves us with stacked thirds. Okay, so again, the process is you get your root, get the third above the root, get the third above the third, get the third above the fifth. Now we're going to get the third above the seventh, which is the ninth. The third above the ninth is the 11th. The third above the 11th is the 13th. Now the third above the 13th is the second octave, which brings us back to 1. So we don't really need that anymore. So from here, it gets pretty easy to decipher what those complex chord names mean. So let's say if you have something like an F major 9, so that means you take an F major chord, add the 7th, and then you add the 9th, right? So an F major 9 would have your F, your A, your C, your E, and then your G. Let's see, let's try another one. F7 sharp 11. Okay, so an F7 sharp 11 would be the spelling of the dominant 7th chord, which is F, A, C, and E flat. And we're going to add the 11, which is a B flat, and sharp that, which turns it into a B. So that will be an F, A, C, E flat, and a B. So that's your F7 sharp 11. Let's do another one. Let's say an F13 sharp 5. So we'll take our last 7th chord with a sharp 5. So we have this is the F7 sharp 5, F, A, C sharp, E flat, and we add our 13. So that is F, A, C sharp, E flat, and a D. Now let's apply the 7th chords and chord extensions to our caged chord shapes. So here I have the caged shapes again with the interval designations for each note of the shape. So from here we can start replacing some of the notes so that we can start including the 7ths and the extensions. So for our C shape, okay, so we have our root, 3rd, 5th, root, 3rd, right? To turn this into a major 7, right, we can take this root right here and move it down, and this is where our major 7 is. So now you'll have a shape like root 3rd, 5th, major 7, and then another 3rd. To get into a dominant 7, you can flat this 7 further, play it here, right? So you have your root 3rd, 5th, flat 7 or dominant 7th, and then that is your 3rd. You can play this arpeggio style, one at a time, pa, 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 pa. Or what you could do is you can just not play this note and just play root 3rd, 5th, flat 7. Another approach would be to find the flat 7 on another string so that it's easier to grab. So this flat 7 right here, the equivalent of that is right here. Okay, so this is also your flat 7. So what you could do is you could drop the 5th, so you have your root 3rd, the flat 7, and then you have your root again here. Let's apply that to the A shape. Major 7, root, 5th, root, drop this down 1, that is your major 7, then 3rd, 5th. So you have root 5th, major 7, 3rd, and then 5th. Turn it into dominant 7 or a flat 7. You have your root, 5th, flat 7 right here, 3rd again, and then 5th. So once you get a hold of that grip, you've probably encountered it before. Okay, it's a common 7th and major 7th chord shape. Let's apply the minor 7th to the A shape. So we have your root 3rd, we have your flat 7 here. 3rd, we're going to turn it into a minor 3rd, so play this fret instead, and then you have your 5th. So you have root 5th, flat 7, minor 3rd, and then 5th. And again, that's a common chord grip. Let's try the minor with a major 7. So let's see, you have the root, 5th, major 7, minor 3rd, and the 5th again. Okay, so that is here, 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 and here. So that's a very cool sounding chord. So let's figure out a major 9 chord. So a major 9 chord, let's use the C shape. So earlier we already outlined the major 7. So we have your root, 3rd, 5th, major 7 is here, and then you have another 3rd right here. However, we have a dilemma because the major 7 and the major 9 are on the same string. So there's no way to play those 2 notes at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to move one of these notes to a lower string so that we can play them together. And we'll take the idea behind the dominant 7 in the C shape earlier, where we took the flat 7 here and played it on the 3rd string, and we just dropped the 5th. So we're going to do that. The major 7 on the 3rd string would be right here, and that will allow us to play a major 9 chord in the C shape. So you have your root, 3rd, major 7, and then you have your major 9 right there. And if it's a dominant 9th, then you have your root, 3rd, flat 7, and you have your major 9. If you have a dominant flat 9 chord, then it will look like root, 3rd, flat 7, take the 9, flat the 9. Now that we've done a few examples, I encourage you to experiment and play around and make up your own chords. At the very least, now when you look at a chord chart, you're going to understand why those shapes look the way they do and which chord intervals are exactly included in each shape. Now, in experimenting with applying the chord extensions to our case shapes, you are likely to hit a limitation right away, because unlike the piano, where we can have a 10 note chord with 10 different notes because we have 10 fingers to play them and 88 keys to find them in, the guitar only has 6 strings and we only have 4 fingers to play them with, maybe 5, plus some intervals require difficult or even impossible stretches to play them. So what we'll need to do is we're going to have to sacrifice some of the fundamental chord tones to make room for the chord extensions. So for example, in our C shape, we have 3/3, 2 roots, and 2/5. We can keep one of each, and the rest we can replace with a nearby chord extension. So this root right here, we can either replace with a 2nd or 9th or a 7th, right? This 3rd can be replaced by a 2nd or 9th or a 4th. The 5th can be replaced with a 6th or a 7th. And the same thing applies to the rest of the chord shapes. Now, a couple more tips to make your chord extensions fit. The perfect 5th interval is probably the most expendable chord tone, right? Because if you hear a chord with and without the perfect 5th in it, there is very little difference. And that's what makes it expendable, because if you play a major chord with just the root and the 3rd, it still tells you that it is a major chord. If you play it with a root, the 3rd, and the 5th, it tells you that it's a bigger sounding major chord. So in some cases, you really don't need the 5th. The only times that the 5th is vital is when it is altered. So when it is either a diminished 5th or an augmented 5th, then it is vital to the chord. And I've already shown you an example of that earlier when we worked out the grip for a major 9 chord, where we took the root, the 3rd, dropped the 5th, and replaced that with the major 7 here, so that we can easily grab the major 9th. Now, another expendable basic tone would be the root, especially if you're playing with other people. So let's say you're playing in a band, right? And you need a complex chord and you have a bass player with you. Chances are he will be playing the root already. And when you play together, the chord is presented in its entirety with him playing the root and you playing the rest of the chord. So more often than not, you probably don't need to play the root anymore. However, it is important to keep in mind what the root of the chord is, even though you're not playing it on the guitar. Now, the indispensable basic chord tone is the 3rd, okay? Because the 3rd determines the tonality of the chord. Now, tonality in its simplest definition is the mood of the chord. So when you hear a major chord, then you hear something that sounds bright, happy, positive. And when you hear a minor chord, you hear the opposite of those qualities. So you hear something sad, something moody, something dark. And the third interval is what determines those qualities. So as much as possible, try not to drop the third in your chord shapes. Now, this discussion of the third interval now leads me into the final topic of this video, which are add and sus chords. Add chords means added tones, and sus chords means suspended tones or suspension. Sus does not mean sustain. So these two chord types affect the third. So when you see a chord that says add 9 or add 11, that means you retain your basic triad and you add a chord tone. You either add your 9th or your 11 or your 13th. Now, as for sus chords, a suspension is the replacement of the third with either your second or your fourth. So for your suspended chords, you can either have a 1, a 2, and then the 5, or a 1, a 4, and then the 5. The 1, 2, and 5 will be your sus 2 chord. The 1, 4, 5 will be your sus 4 chord. Now, sometimes we also encounter a sus 9 or a sus 11 chord. Now, technically, they are still the same chord, but with the octave displaced. So a sus 9 would probably be something like this. The root, the 5th, and the 9. And a sus 11 would be the root, the 5th, and then the 11. As for add chords, you can also use the lower octave versions of these chord extensions. So you can also use the 2, the 4, and the 6, as long as you're not replacing the third with any one of them. Now, the main difference between the add and the sus chords, even though they may sound similar, is that the add chords retains the third, so it retains the tonality of the chord. You will hear whether the chord is major or minor with some added extra tones. A sus chord suspends that tonality. So the sus 2, sus 4, or sus 9 or sus 11 chords are neither major nor minor. So you can either play a major scale over it, or you can also improvise a minor scale over it. Now let's apply these to our caged shapes. Let's do an add 9 in the C shape. So we can keep the root, keep the third, keep the 5th, replace this root with the 9th, and there you have it. 1, 3, 5, and then 9. Let's turn this into an add 4. I have the root, this third, we can replace it with the 4th right here. So root, 4th, 5th, root, and then we still have another third here. So it's an add 4 because we still have the third within the chord. Let's work out another add chord. Add 9 in the E shape. Okay, so we have a root, 5th, root, this root right here. You can add your 9 here, right? So now you have root, 5th, 9th, 3rd, 5th, and then root. That is a very long stretch depending on where you are on the fingerboard, right? So you can bar this, 3rd finger, 4th finger, 2nd finger, right? So that's quite a stretch. That is also the infamous opening chord to Every Breath You Take by The Police. Now, an easier add 9 grip would be to, let's see, if we grab this with our thumb and omit this 5th, you can play 3rd finger, 2nd finger, 1st finger, and then instead of playing this root, you can play the 9th here with your pinky. Now that would be a Hendrix style chord grip with the thumb, as used in songs like Little Wing. Now let's take a look at our sus chords. Let's take the A shape right here. Let's apply a sus 4 voicing here. So A shape, root, 5th, root. This is the 3rd. We're going to omit the 3rd and replace it with the 4th. The 4th is right here. And then we have another 5th there. So we have the root, 5th, root, 4th, and then 5th. So that takes the 3rd out of the picture, and the chord is now suspended. Let's do a sus 2 or sus 9. depending on how you look at it. Root 5th, root 3rd, get the 2nd right here, so we're gonna omit this and play the 2nd instead, and then 5th. So now we have our root 5th, root 2nd, 5th. So that is your suspended 2nd chord. You can also think of this as your 9 because in this voicing, this is in the 2nd octave. So you can also think of it as your root 5th, root 9th, and then the 5th. Let's do another one. Let's say the D shape, right? So we have your root 5th, root. This is our 3rd. Replace it with the 4th for a sus4, or replace it with the 2nd for a sus2. Now I know this is a lot of information to digest in one sitting, and believe me, I myself did not understand it at first. It took me some time, it took a lot of thinking, until finally my own comprehension of all this stuff kicked in. So I will extend that advice to you. Just take your time, think about it, work on it a little bit at a time, and eventually everything will become clear. So that concludes this installment of Music Theory for Guitarists, talking about 7th chords and chord extensions. So in the next video, we will talk about harmonized scales and chord progressions. And finally, the video that all of you have been waiting for, we'll talk about scales and modes and how everything works over all this stuff. So if you dug this content, please give it a thumbs up, like. Feel free to share it with your friends. And if you have any comments, suggestions, questions, clarifications, just post them in the comments box below. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe, and please invite all your friends to subscribe to my channel as well. So there you have it. Peace, love, good heaven and stuff. Happy guitaring, and have fun experimenting with all this information. And I will see you guys again very soon. Cheers.